Sergeant Schaefer.
All right, we are at the intersection of the Knoxland Road and Chambersburg Road, US 30 now. This is the Whiter House, W-H-I-T-E-R. It was here at the time of the battle. The front section, the back section, as you can see, has been added. It's now owned by the Park Service. They bought it about 15 years ago, I guess it was, with donations from a lot of people. And I'd like my money back if you get a chance.
Anyway, Park Service moves slow.
Yes, I know. All right. On the afternoon of June 30th, 1863, Buford's cavalry, leading the left wing of the Army of the Potomac, arrives in Gettysburg. They find on the outskirts of town, on the west side of town, where we just walked over, or we just rode over, some Confederates. They're Confederates from Johnson Pettigrew's brigade, who has been sent out here by Lee to see what's going on over here. Keep in mind that Lee feels he has no reliable cavalry. He does have some cavalry, but Albert Jenkins' cavalry, but he does not want to rely on them. So he sends an infantry brigade out here. When the Buford's cavalry comes out, riding out from town, Pettigrew, who's been told not to bring on an engagement, hightails it back to Cashtown, where Robert E. Lee is, that way.
How far is that?
To where?
To Cashtown from here.
It's about 5 miles.
About 5 miles. We are 3 miles. We are exactly 3 miles from the center of Gettysburg at this location. Pettigrew reports what he's seen, but Lee still doesn't know what's here. Is it just cavalry? Is it militia? Is it the Army of the Potomac? He doesn't know. So the next day, he, again using infantry instead of cavalry, he sends a division out here to scout and see what's out here. And the leading brigade of that infantry column is Archer's brigade. In the meantime, Buford, knowing there are Confederates to the west, because that's the way Pettigrew went back, has posted the cavalry out along this road. At this location is the Vedette Post. That's the farthest sentries, were then called vedettes. And there are 2 soldiers here from Company E of the 8th Illinois Cavalry, Privates Thomas Benton Kelly and James Hale. Back on Hare Ridge, where we're going to have lunch, I believe, the Hare Ridge Tavern, is the main picket post. That is under the command of Ed's Ultra Persona, Sergeant Levi Schaefer, also Company E, 8th Illinois Cavalry. Further back from that, at Seminary Ridge, is the reserve picket post. And at that location, the command is under Lieutenant Marcellus Ephraim Jones of Wheaton, Illinois. Lieutenant Jones, also from Company E of the 8th Illinois Cavalry, is in charge of all of the pickets along this road. The vedettes, the main picket post, and the reserve picket post. At approximately 7 o'clock in the morning, Privates Kelly and Hale see Confederates approaching the Marsh Creek Bridge, which is down that way about 750 yards.
About twice as far as where we parked the bus.
Right. We can't see it today, of course, because of the trees that have overgrown the road. But the Marsh Creek Bridge is down there. Anyway, and as you know, Marsh Creek and Rock Creek form a square around the city, around the town of Gettysburg. Marsh Creek flowing on the west side, north and south, and on the south side, east and west. Rock Creek flows north and south on the east side, and east and west on the north side of the town. So crossing the Marsh Creek Bridge is the head of the Confederate infantry column. In the meantime, Private Kelly has ridden back to the main picket post on Hare Ridge, and he notifies Sergeant Schaefer. Sergeant Schaefer sends another trooper from the 8th Illinois Company E, George Hine, back to the main picket post to alert to the reserve picket post, to alert Lieutenant Jones. Jones had just arrived there after riding the picket line, mounts his horse again and rides out here, picking up Sergeant Schaefer as he comes westward along the Chambersburg Road. When he gets to this location, the Confederates are crossing the bridge. There is a rail fence located right here. And in the old pictures, one of which I have with me, you can see the rail fence located right here. Lieutenant Jones says to Sergeant Schaefer, "Can I borrow your carbine?" It is a sharp single-shot carbine, not a Spencer repeater. A sharp single-shot carbine. And of course, being an officer, Jones did not carry a carbine. So he borrows Sergeant Schaefer's carbine, leans it on the fence, as he himself said, and I will read to you his exact words of what happened here. And this is from Jones's reminiscences. "I saw one of the men from the main picket post, George Hine, coming full speed, who said that Sergeant Schaefer wanted me at once. Springing into my saddle, I was soon there and could see a cloud of dust rising above the trees. Taking a leaf from my memorandum book, I reported to Major Beveridge, that's John L. Beveridge, who was in command of the 8th Illinois Cavalry here at Gettysburg, the colonel and lieutenant colonel not being with the regiment. And by the way, Beveridge later became governor of Illinois. That there was evidently a heavy column approaching. By this time, a little after 7 o'clock, the enemy's advance, composed of Archer's Tennessee Brigade, followed by Davis and Brockenbrough, appeared in sight at Marsh Creek. Upon sighting our picket post, they deployed skirmishers on either side of the road with the precision of veterans, marching steadily down the pike from the stone bridge. I had sent the horses in one quarter, the men to the rear, asking Sergeant Levi Schaefer, who was in charge of the picket line on the pike, for his carbine. I took aim at an officer on a white or light gray horse and fired the first shot at the Battle of Gettysburg. Now that this was of key importance to Jones, obviously, is also noted in his application to the Malus, the military order of the Loyal Legion of the United States. In that application, there is a section asking what the soldier's main experiences during the war was. And in his section and his handwriting, Lieutenant, later Captain Jones, wrote, "It is recorded in Washington that I was the man who fired the first shot at the Battle of Gettysburg." After the war, Jones, as I said, promoted to captain along the way, returned to Wheaton. He was politically active. He served as postmaster of Wheaton. He served as sheriff of DuPage County. Unfortunately, in 1900, he died broke and was buried in the Wheaton Cemetery. In 1976, I found his grave there in the Wheaton Cemetery, and I, together with the Round Table, we were able to obtain a tombstone, have it suitably engraved. We had a ceremony, and we put a tombstone on Jones's grave that notes his rank, his service in the war, and that he fired the first shot at the Battle of Gettysburg. Had a very nice ceremony. Those of you who may want to visit that tombstone and see his grave, if you go into the Wheaton Cemetery, that's what it's called, Wheaton Cemetery. This grave is directly across the little road from the office of the cemetery. So if you stand on the porch of the office, you're looking at his grave. It's in the Jones Meacham plot. Meacham was his wife's maiden name. In 1887 or 6, whatever the hell it was, it says on here. 1886. Jones and 2 other soldiers, Riddler and Schaefer, decided to mark this spot. And they bought this monument from limestone mined where? Anybody know? How about Naperville, Illinois? This limestone was mined in Naperville, Illinois. They had this monument made. You can see the inscriptions on the 4 sides. And they came here in 1887 and put the monument up on this site. And it has sat here ever since. I have a picture of Jones and Thomas Benton Kelly, the vedette, who, by the way, was Jones's cousin. They were both born in Pulteney, Vermont. And the gentleman who claimed that he was the one that they fired at. He's absolutely full of you-know-what. We can't even find his name among the veterans of the Confederate Army. So he's a phony. But anyway, I have that picture of the 3 of them. at the reunion in 1890, whatever, 92. And so if anybody wants to see that picture, you're welcome to. But that is the story of the first shot.
There's a BS artist in Devon's Brigade. He's going to claim he fires it.
Alpheus Hodges of the 9th New York Cavalry. In the regimental history of the 9th New York Cavalry, the author Newell Chaney, who wrote the regimental history, claims that Corporal Alpheus Hodges of the 9th New York Cavalry fired the first shot. All of the modern experts have completely disproved that, because first of all, the 9th New York Cavalry was in Devon's Brigade. Of course, the 8th Illinois was in Gamble's Brigade. Gamble having originally started as Lieutenant Colonel of the 8th Illinois. And Devon's Brigade was posted on the Mummersburg Road, from the Mummersburg Road over to the Carlisle Road. The Confederates did not approach the battlefield from that direction. So there was nobody.
Road diverts to the
What?
north of, and the Mummersburg Road runs north and west, not west.
That's right. So there was no Confederates coming in on that road. So who he fired at, we don't know, but it wasn't a Confederate soldier.
A rabbit.
So that's and the only place you'll see that account is in the history of the 9th New York Cavalry.
Any other questions for Marshall? Tell him, Marshall, tell him why, tell him what happened to the carbine.
Oh, yeah, we traced through a fella I met when we did the ceremony, putting a headstone on Jones's grave. I met a fellow who worked for the Aurora Beacon newsletter paper, and he was a great-grandson of Levi Schaefer. And his name was Bob Howlax, a very nice guy. I understand he lives in California now. Anyway, Bob did a lot of publicity for that ceremony and for the Jones house, which I'll mention in a minute. And through that, we were able to trace through the Schaefer family, found out that the carbine, Schaefer brought it home, and it was in the family until 1944, when Schaefer's granddaughter loaned it to somebody and died without telling anybody in the family who she loaned it to. So one of you who may have a Sharps carbine, you may have the gun that was fired the first shot at Gettysburg. By the way, Jones had money before he died. He had been very successful, as I mentioned, for a time, and his house was a very large edifice. It stood right close to the high school on Roosevelt Road. I visited the house, was able to tour it, left my card, got a call a few years later from a lady who worked for the high school district because they were using it as an office. And it's a big house with pillars and columns and 2 stories. Anyway, she called me to tell me that the high school was going to demolish the house to make a parking lot. I got a hold of Bob Howlax again. He ran a nice story in the Aurora Beacon, and we were able to locate a law firm in Wheaton that had bought a lot and was going to build a new office building. They arranged to buy the house for $1 from the school district, and they moved it. They moved the whole house to their lot, and you can see it there today. It is just north of the athletic field, on that first street north of the athletic field, north of Roosevelt Road, and you can see it from Roosevelt Road. It's a big white house with 3 or 4 columns in front of it, and it is there today. It's the law offices of the law firm of Peregrine Stein. And if you go into the law offices, they will hand you a booklet about Marcellus Jones. But that was.
If you have any other questions, you'll have to ask Marshall at lunch or on the bus on the tour, because we've got a big now. Wonderful stuff. Now you're looking generally due west. In the distance, you can see South Mountain. The road where the heavy traffic is the Chambersburg Pike. Chambersburg is 23 miles that direction. That's where General Lee is. Off to your right, you have Oak Hill. That's where General Ewell is going to show up about 12:30 in the day. Now, as you gather, the Confederates have learned on the afternoon of the 30th, there's Union cavalry in Gettysburg. They are going to the command of that man to my right, John Buford, who had arrived here from Fairfield via the Fairfield Road about noon and is on Cemetery Ridge, just to your rear where that building Smucker Hall is. When Pettigrew's brigade arrives, as Marshall said, not to repeat him again, Lee has no organized cavalry with him. And he sends Pettigrew's brigade to find out who is in Gettysburg. He's going to take with him several companies of the 55th Virginia, who are familiar with the area, and they're going to go here and find out. As we heard, from Hare Ridge, you'll find out the Union troops here. We're going to see them, and he's going to obey his orders. Found out the enemy is here, and he is going to return to Cashtown, where his commanding officer has arrived, Harry Heath, and before nightfall, General A.P. Hill, Harry Heath, the commander of the 3rd Corps. Now, all they know is there are Union soldiers in Gettysburg. Now, Heath is going to be called in, and he's going to be told he's to go to Gettysburg and find out the strength of the enemy force. Only later will he dream up the story. He's going to get shoes. Now, if there were any shoes in Gettysburg, it would have been glommed on by General Murray, who had been in Gettysburg on the 26th of June. Now, this lady has the hots for General Murray. A rather rough character.
Hey, there you
He had been in Gettysburg on the 26th of June. So he is to go there, find out who is there. But he's going to, now Lee's orders, he does not want a battle brought on until his army is concentrated at Cashtown Gap. I would argue the biggest mistake any Confederate is going to make is when Hill and Heath are going to send more than 10,000 men to find who is in Gettysburg. If you send 10,000 men and they want to fight, you're going to have a battle. So, as they prepare to move out, General Pettigrew had been here the previous day, and he will eventually have the highest grades of any man that will ever graduate from Chapel Hill. He's probably the only person in the United States of English descent who speaks and reads Arabic fluently. Something that would be very valuable to us now. He's writing the definitive history of the Moorish conquest of Spain. He's a dilettante. And he is going up until Archer, a graduate of Princeton. If I were you, I would be careful when you go to Gettysburg today. But you're going to find that Archer and he are going to be knocked. As we heard about the first shot, and by noon, by 9 o'clock, the cavalry has fallen back to this point here. And this, of course, is where Gilbert will form his main line of resistance. We're standing in what had been a wheat field. There is the unfinished railroad cut. Look to the right. That railroad cut extends from the area stationed in Gettysburg here to where we parked our bus today, out near Marsh Creek. It will not be completed till the 1870s, when it will be extended on to the Missouri River. So all that's there are the cuts and fills. There are no rails position, no ties position, no culverts, nothing putting it in. A major stockholder in it is Thaddeus Stevens. And as they arrive in the area, Hubert will form his men on the right where we're standing. Captain Caleb will position 4 guns. 2 here, 2 south of the pike, and 2 south of Herbst Woods. That's Herbst Woods if you turn to the left. There's the 6 guns in the position. And supporting them are going to be the Cavalry Brigade commanded by Colonel Gamble. He's going to have his cavalry, and they're going to be fighting dismounted. There are no Spencer rifles here. There are no Spencer carbines. In spite of what you heard in the movie Gettysburg, and you've read in most of the books. I see you even have a label up there. Hubert does not have any repeating weapons here. Hubert plays the part well, and his men are going to be deployed with the 8th Illinois, New York on the far left. The 8th Illinois, and where we are, the 12th Illinois, just part of them, in this area, and north of the road, the 3rd Indiana. We're going to be fighting dismounted. The Confederates that are going to tangle with them are going to be 2 brigades. Archer's Brigade is going to deploy on the area where you just ate lunch. Archer has 3 Tennessee regiments, the 1st, the 7th, and the 14th, and he has the 4th, 5th Alabama Battalion as skirmishers, and on his far right, he's going to have the 13th Alabama. Now you're going to have a weak sister on the left. It's Joe Davis. What's wrong with Joe? The problem is who his uncle is. His uncle is Jefferson Dennis Davis. Now Jefferson Davis didn't like his middle name. His mother gives him that name. He's the 10th of 11 children. He's sending a message to his father. So he'd been a stabber. It'd be all right to have a slug working for his father or for his uncle if he's a staff officer. But when you put him in command of troops in the field, he better be damn good. There's a difference between a staff troop and a person leading men in the field, whether you're in the Civil War or Korea or World War II. So, he is in command of a brigade. He does not have one of his regiments with him. The 11th Mississippi will get shot up on the 3rd. But they will not get an initiative to fighting on day 1. They're going to take position north of the railroad cut. The railroad cut would be in the area where you can see that silo up ahead. There were no silos in the United States before. The Trivial Pursuit people would like to know until 1906. They were brought here from Germany in 1906. So he deploys his men north of the railroad cut, and he's going to have them from left to right. 42nd Mississippi on the right, the 2nd Mississippi and the 2nd, and the 55th North Carolina, a big regiment, almost 600 men on the left. Now, the skirmishes are going to be active. Now, briefly back before we'll turn it into call Jeff up here, you're going to have the Reynolds will spend the night south of Morrison's House, south on the Gettysburg Road, 2 miles south of Marsh Creek. Gets up early that morning. He's probably not received a copy of the memorandum on talking about the mental block now, Marshall.
Pike Creek Circle.
Pike Creek Circle. He's has not received the message and starts north. Now, leading off that day is going to be Wadsworth's Brigade. Wadsworth, if you turn your head momentarily, see that man standing on the pedestal there with his arm pointing. Very wealthy man. He's going to be up fighting the hills as they move out, and not having the lead that day are the 1st Brigade of the 1st Army Corps, and that is Jeff Woods, command. He's going to be able to start with them very shortly. They're going to be the 2nd Brigade in line. That's going to be commanded by Longsaw Murray. And a basketball player, what team coach would like him. He's born in North Carolina, grew up in Cambridge City, Indiana, and is over 6'5" and weighs about 140 pounds. Known as Longsaw. And he has with him, as he moves out, he will be the 2nd Brigade in line. 1st Brigade in line is going to be Lysander Cutler, the 86th New York, the 55th Pennsylvania, 147th New York. They're all going to be taking position north of the railroad cut. The 147th has not seen the elephant. Taking position when they arrive here and relieve the cavalry is going to be south of the road are going to be the 84th New York. But if you want to get along with them, you better damn sure call them the 14th Brooklyn or the Red-Legged Devil. Because that's the, if you want to we're going to be down there where we're going to see see Old Man Burns. And with them, north of the road is going to be the 95th Pacific New York. But they're not going to be here initially. We have to get have to get Reynolds here, and we're going to turn it over here to my friend Jeff Wirt. He's going to talk about Reynolds' arrival here. Reynolds is going to, on near the Dubois House, going to leave the advance right over here with Jeff Wirt. And you're going to have a conversation between he and John Buford. Take it over, Jeff.
And we're going to go over to the Reynolds statue to do the fight.
No,
we're going to do the fight here. We're doing the fight here, or we're going to do it over there?
Let's have the conversation.
Okay.
What would you rather do?
Oh, that's fine. I just want to know what to say.
All right. We're going to conversation with Buford.
Okay.
And then
All right.
we'll send him back and we'll do the fighting over the other side.
Oh, okay, good. All right.
So right now, you're just getting into what you do so good. It's a rival and what they're going to be talking about.
Okay. Wadsworth's division the night before he had said camp to Marsh Creek. That night, the 19th Indiana was assigned picket duty. So they're going to be right along Marsh Creek, and they're going to have their weapons loaded. The rest of the Iron Brigade will not have loaded weapons. So as they're marching in, as you know, they rotate brigades. And I always like, I don't know whether it makes sense or not, but there's always irony, I think, in some things, or fate, or whatever. And on this day, Butler, the former colonel of the 6th Wisconsin, he is going to lead his brigade first. So they're going to come here. The critical clash, in the sense, is going to be down there, and that's going to be with the Iron Brigade. Now, I'll tell you my bias. They're the finest combat troops I arguably have ever studied in the Civil War. They're the men from way down beyond the sunset in the Eastern parlance. So you folks from Illinois, any Illinois regiment, I think, would have fit way down beyond the sunset, too. They're John Gibbons' men. By the way, they hated Gibbons. When he first came and drilled him, and then he made them buy these uniforms that they had to spend money on, the hats and all that, and he despised them. And he drilled them so much in '62, and he made them buy white leggings. And they had to wear white leggings drilling. That ceased when Gibbon got up one morning and found 4 white leggings on his horse. He got the hint from these boys that that's not what they want to do. So they're marching up Emmitsburg Pike. 6th Wisconsin coming, bands playing, the Campbells are coming. They reach somewhere just around the Cadore buildings. Reynolds sends staff officers ahead. You know, he's going back. Hurry him up. Let's go. So what they do, they take down some rail fences around, probably just south of the Cadore buildings, or opposite the barn in that area, and they're going to come across country right behind us, and you can follow their track. They're going to go right up over Seminary Ridge, down through into the swale. Colors Brigade will cross the Chambersburg Pike and deploy. At the head of the Iron Brigade was the 2nd Wisconsin. Now remember, they had not loaded their rifles, nor had the 7th Wisconsin, who trailed them. Along came, behind them was finally the 19th Indiana, and then the 24th Michigan. By the way, the Michigan boys are new to it. They came in October of '62. The veterans in the Iron Brigade, and by the way, once Gibbon fought with them at Groveton, they changed their opinion of Gibbon. Gibbon, however, never changed his opinion along Saul Meredith. He couldn't stand Meredith. He hated the very idea that he got his brigade because he was a politician, and as far as Gibbon was concerned, that's all needed to be said. But, you know, how can he lead then? But he was well liked. Okay. 24th Michigan comes in, they're bounty men. They received a bounty to join up. Well, that was a little bit against them, but the worst thing to the other members of the Iron Brigade was they were Democrats. Most of the Iron Brigade, they were all Republicans. Here we get this Democratic regiment. They sort of proved themselves a little bit of, not much in Fredericksburg, a little bit of Chancellorsville because they made the river crossing, and they finally have gotten the hats. And that's what they gave these men an identity. But more than anything, they simply wanted to prove to these snotty Easterners, you New Englanders and all you others that think you're superior to us Hicks, if you use the word out west, and we can fight with any of you. And that was part of what they wanted to do. They write about it. They want to prove to them that they're worthy of anybody from up the east. And so they're coming across this field, 2nd Wisconsin. Reynolds is going to ride out, and one of the double-day staff officers comes up to and hurries them on. But Reynolds rides out, and he is going to meet them as they're coming through that swale behind us, opposite where the monument, where Reynolds' monument is, where he got shot. As a Confederate soldier will soon say, right afterwards, everything was going good, and as he said, we suddenly met a hard proposition. And they indeed met a hard proposition. So we're going to find it over there, right, Ed? Very good.
All right. Now, when Reynolds arrives here, he comes first. And he rides up. This is while they're tearing down the fence. He'll ride up on his horse with a couple of staffers to where we were when we were at our first museum. And there are two versions. I see the park is the museum is brought into that Buford and Jerome are up in the cupola. And as Reynolds rides up, he's going to say, "How goes it?" And Buford will come down, will shout down, "The enemy is coming in force," and they are, comes down, and they're going to have a conversation. They're going to ride over here, and the decision is made that Reynolds is going to bring forward the 1st Division of the 1st Army Corps and relieve the cavalry. But the cavalry has now bought 2 hours as they come forward. Caleb's guns will be sent to the rear. All second main battery will move in here. They're now, Norwich is not as good a publicity. They're founded long before PMI. They put more general officers in the Union Army, but they don't write about them as much as PMI does. So it's the Norse equivalent of PMI. All are graduates, and they're going to be the great position. All is going to replace them. Now we're going to soon get here to what we came here to see a lot of people killed and wounded. Now before we leave here, we're going to have 2 monuments here. We're going to have the monument of General Reynolds. Reynolds as the champion person for monuments here. This is his equestrian monument. Now, until there's no hard and fast rule, they used to quote all equestrian monuments that the horse has 4 hoofs on the ground, nothing happens to the man's body. If it has 2 hoofs off the ground, he is going to be wounded in battle, and if the horse has 1 hoof off the ground, like this one, he's going to die in battle. So you can see, but that will be taken care of when they're
the back one's off the ground. 2, you're dead.
2 dead.
1 hoof's up, you're dead. 1 roof up, you're
And then you go over here and you look at Buford's statue. Buford's statue is, of course, a pedestrian statue, but the important thing about this will be 4 guns. Weight of this gun is a Marshall depot in Gettysburg National Military Park, 1890 Pennsylvania regiments, as you can see on your map, and 1 New York regiment, the 80th New York. Now we're going to have to have Reynolds meet his end at our next stop. So what we're going to have to do, we've got to deal with the morning's fighting here. And the morning's fighting is going to be over very quickly and with great decisiveness against the Confederates. Now as we drove south and went by that other bus, we went by the monuments of the 94th New York first, and then the monument to the 84th New York. But since I like them to like me, a red-legged devil. They wore tight-fitting red breeches. Ted Alexander would look magnificent in them. And a red hat, red cabbie, and white lace. And the best thing against them is Archer's Brigade. When Archer's Brigade arrives, by this time when Archer's Brigade starts arriving, Reynolds is dead, but we're going to kill him at our next stop. And as they arrive, Archer's men are arriving, the 3 Tennessee regiments, 1st, 7th, and 10th, and the 13th Alabama, covered by the 5th Alabama sharpshooters. They suddenly realized something bad. And that's what he was talking about, the Black Jeff Davis hat. Because they've been led to believe there's only militia here. And they have little respect for the militia. The militia is usually good seeing the Confederates and running as fast as they can in the other direction. Just like the poor 26th Pennsylvania militia did on June 26th. And they're going to raise the cry, it ain't the militia, it's a goddamn black hats. And that, of course, refers to the Iron Brigade. Now, what's going to happen next, we're going to cover at our next stop. We're going to find out what is going to happen to Reynolds, and after Reynolds is cut down, the Iron Brigade will charge, and they will rout Archer's Brigade. Archer's Brigade is going to be running that way as fast as their legs could carry them, pursued by the Iron Brigade. Private Murphy will spread out in front, and he'll horse collar James J. Archer. James J. Archer is the first general officer in the proud Army of Northern Virginia to be captured by those damn Yankees since Robert E. Lee took command of them on the first day of June. Naturally, when he and around several hundred men are going to the rear as prisoners, Archer is going to be very, very unhappy when Doubleday is going to ride up. Doubleday is now in command, going to get off his horse, and this looks like General, I got to get some scrawny guy. Going to ride up Doubleday's going to ride up, get off his horse, and stick his hand out and offer to shake this Princeton graduate's hand. And Archer will not take his hand, and he will stomp off to being a prisoner of war and will die while prisoners. So round 1 will go to the Iron Brigade. We're now going into 2. Now, Jeff is going to be, he's not going to be with us very long, because he's going to be the 24th Michigan. And they're going to go lose 80% of their men. Most of them in this fight were going to set, because the Confederates are going to try in the afternoon, and that's what this refers to. And there we can see advancing Pettigrew's brigade. Remember, they had been here on that reconnaissance. Pettigrew has shown he was brighter than Archer, brighter than Heath, because he's going to warn Archer to be careful. And Archer, we have seen, has heeded not. So when Pettigrew is going to attack, he has a brigade that has seen mostly action in North Carolina. The monument we see right behind us is the 26th North Carolina. Archie Davis, who headed Wachovia Banks when they were a small bank in North Carolina, loved North Carolina. And in 1985, at the time of the 125th anniversary, he's going to erect 7 North Carolina monuments here. 2 of them refer to the 26th North Carolina, the one that's here and the one that is at the wall. were indicating their position on the 3rd. On the morning of the first day of July, 818 men had answered roll call. It's the biggest regiment numerically in the rebel army. The other regiments are equally strong, but not that strong. The 11th North Carolina is going to be on their right. On their right's the 27th, the 47th, and on their right is the 52nd. Now the 26th North Carolina is going to lose in the next less than an hour. They're going to have less than 200 men answering roll call on the evening of the first day of July. That means they've lost over 600 men. Now, he has lost 80% of his men. He has lost over 300. He's going to tell you about what they're going to do. So it's like in the ancients, like they like to write about. They like to write. The ancients like to talk about when Greek meets Greek. That's the worst type of fighting you can have. When you fought with short swords and pikes, and you can look into the guy's eyes when you kill him. And they're going to be just like this. Now, you have at the base of this hill, you have Willoughby Run. You can look down there, and you can see the waters of Willoughby Run. I can see them looking down the trail there. So they're going to start out there in what was formerly the Gettysburg golf course land, which the Park Service has recently acquired. And they're going to advance. And they're going to be eyeball to eyeball. Now remember, these men have had a good morning. They've beaten up on Archer's Brigade, the 24th Michigan. Now they're going to have a tougher bunch to meet and do a repetition. As I say, if you can read that, the 26th North Carolina is going through 13 color bearers. The 13th color bearer will be George King Burgoyne, the colonel. He'll carry it, and a graduate of VMI, he will die. As will his lieutenant colonel will try to get them. But so it gives you an idea of the fierceness of the fighting. And he's going to talk about it from the other side. Now, when they finally, the Iron Brigade is finally driven from this area, the birds will be flying through the area like they're in a shock because of the terrible fighting that takes place here. And by 3 o'clock, the Confederates will hold Herbst Woods. But now we'll turn it over to the Iron Brigade, and particularly as the British force. As you've got two regiments losing almost 80% of their men. And remember, the 26th North Carolina will be in the charge on day 3. In World War II or Korea, you would be not sending regiments that take that heavy casualties until they've made up their casualties.
Okay, after they captured this position in the morning, and you can see it down there, the 19th Indiana, right up along here, you know, this road obviously is post-war. Along that line up there, 7th and 2nd, 6th is kept back. And we're going to talk about the 6th later at the railroad cut. During the morning, Long Saul Meredith sent a number of requests to Doubleday and Wadsworth saying, I don't like this position. You're hanging us out here. And if you look at it, they're being hung out. The main line's back here. They're in this sort of a salient position, and he was told, no, you will hold this ground here, so they are going to hold it. When the 26th North Carolina starts out, they are going to be coming, as Ed said, from the former golf course. What you have to keep in mind is this is much more open. In fact, before they will cross Willoughby Run, well, as they're advancing, the colonel of the 24th Michigan, Henry Morrill, says, "Give them hell, boys." And they start to open fire on them, and 4 color bearers of the 13 that are going to fall, 4 of them are shot down even before the 26th North Carolina crosses Willoughby Run. So the only way that's possible, obviously, is this terrain is much more.
Remember, since he's the 3rd color bearer, one of them has to be Henry King Burgoyne.
Well, later.
Later, yeah.
Yeah, no, he's not. So, as they're coming up through, the clash is going to, and finally, in Henry Morrill's words, they, meaning the rebels, and I quote, "came on with rapid strides, yelling like demons." They finally, as they close up this hill where we're standing, coming up the slope, they opened their first volley, the 26th North Carolina, and then all of a sudden, this combat simply escalated into a continuous roar. The 24th Michigan is going to be pushed back. Okay? They're going to go back through these woods. They are going to make 4 stands. This initial stand and 3 more. At one point in the fighting, the 2 lines of battle were 20 paces apart. So that's why you look at their casualties on both sides. There's no way you can hardly miss them. And as they're going back, they had lost 4 color bearers to 24th Michigan. Morrill, the colonel, seizes the flag. And Private William Kelly goes up to him and says, and I quote, "The colonel of the 24th shall never carry a flag while I am alive." Kelly picked up a flag, and within a very short period of time, maybe seconds or a minute or so, he is shot down and killed. Now, what happens even worse, you hardly believe it in the sense of what happens, is over here comes the 11th North Carolina against the 19th Indiana. They overlap the flank, and they're going to hit them frontal and flank. And as one of them said, the volleys from North Carolina, 11th North Carolina, almost annihilated us. Dudley, who was colonel, said, well, Lieutenant Colonel William Dudley, his word, the line was held as long as there were men left to hold it. 8 color bearers were shot down in the 19th Indiana. And Captain William Moore, and these are his words, the slaughter in our ranks now became frightful, beyond description. The dead lay piled up on the ground, and the shrieks and groans of the wounded was too horrible for contemplation. A staff officer said, like dew before the morning sun, our men wilted away. They pulled back. Finally, they ordered a retreat, or said, we soon got into confusion. No soldiers on earth could stand such terrible fire from both front and flank. As they're collapsing back, 11th North Carolina closes in. They're only literally 20 yards away as the 19th is falling back into utter confusion. And as one of the North Carolinians says, we just mowed them down. And finally, they're going to be pushed back. Over here, the 7th and the 2nd are going to hold out a little longer, but the 24th and 19th, but once they collapse, and the 26th North Carolina is here, and 11th, they're going to be forced back to on the other side of the woods. Of the 5 regiments in Lee's army to sustain the highest casualty rate in a given engagement, 2 of them were Groveton, 1st Texas at Antietam, and the 26th North Carolina here at Gettysburg. They had a common foe, those damn black hats.
Really?
Yes. And I think it was the 21st Georgia and 21st North Carolina at Groveton. And Groveton, folks, if you think of it, you haven't studied it, they literally were standing perhaps 100 yards or so apart, or even less at some point, for an hour and a half.
Remember, 20 paces is less, is 1/5 of 100 yards.
You're right. But for an hour and a half of sustained combat at Groveton, and they were just shot to pieces. Now, the 1st Texas in the cornfield, the Iron Brigade were not the only ones, but they're part of the men who just slaughtered the 1st Texas there. So that's a record unmatched by any other Union command in the war. And by the time sunset's over here, this is a brigade of 1,800 men. Only a third of them will be left standing as they retreat back to Cemetery Hill. That's how many men in the Iron Brigade. No other Union brigade at Gettysburg is going to lose this many men on this field.
a little bit on the 11th North Carolina. Its commander is another one as tall as Colonel Leventhorpe as Meredith. He's about 6'5", and he would have, the ladies would like him, he has a bar sinister in his coat of arms. That means he's a bastard. He has a father that is of some rank as an English gentleman, and he will be born by a serving girl that works for his father. And the 11th will lose almost percentage-wise, but not as many because it's not as strong a regiment numerically as the 26th North Carolina. Now remember, we're not going to have much time to spend it. When they're up on when they're on East Cemetery Hill, and there are no people on Culp's Hill, when Hancock is there, he's going to General Wadsworth, and he says, I want you to send men up onto Culp's Hill. Wadsworth will protest that the Iron Brigade and Cutler's Brigade have taken heavy casualties. Hancock's words are, you didn't hear me right. I said I wanted your men up on Culp's Hill. So if you had tried to take Culp's Hill, he would find out if the 800 men left in the Iron Brigade could still fight, and I'm sure that he would have found out it. Because there are people on Culp's Hill, and they're members of the Iron Brigade. They go up there when Hancock orders them to after 8 p.m. in the evening. Any questions?
Where's the 19th Indiana formed?
The 19th Indiana is formed, and they're going to be formed roughly the same time the 7th of Wisconsin and the 6th Wisconsin. They're going to be formed because Indiana does not have a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, or 5th Indiana because they keep sacred the regiment's designation that fought in the Mexican War.
Were they from any particular place in Indiana?
They're from the various counties.
Yeah, they didn't come into the Army until the September, October 6th. 2nd Wisconsin is at 1st Manassas.
Yes. Now the 2nd Wisconsin is one of these regiments like the 1st Minnesota. Their governor, they've enlisted for 90 days. For 75,000 men for 90 days, and their governors will volunteer them, and they'll get a lot of lawsuits. I volunteered for 90 days, and the son of a bitch governor has volunteered me to serve for 3 years. Now Marshal Krolik would have to take their cases. You know, he's a lawyer that likes to argue cases in court. I would hire, if I was one of them, I'd hire Marshal Krolik to sue the War Department and the President.
By the way, at 1st Manassas, the claim is that the colonel and lieutenant colonel of 2nd Wisconsin were the first 2 officers back in Washington during the rout. They probably left before the fighting was even over. And they were no longer the colonel and lieutenant colonel of the 2nd Wisconsin after that.
All right, well, we'll now go talk about the death of Reynolds and the arrival